The day Silas Blackwood pulled me from Keelhaul Bay's grimy fighting pit, I was in a thin top, laughing wildly in my last life. I knew he had the wrong woman, Serafina, but I seized the chance to escape. He swept me away, treating me like a treasure in his gilded cage. That ended when the real Serafina's death certificate arrived, became the focus of all his hatred. You lied. Because of you, Sarah died out there. I'll make you suffer everything she did tenfold. He threw me into a cellar of his own making, inventing new torments each night, blades testing my flesh, bone, deep, cold, degrading treatment from his men. He watched coldly, only calling a doctor to keep me alive. Even the child I carried, 10 months, he tore away without hesitation. As steel sliced me open, he covered Serafina's eyes with tenderness. In my final moment, I threw myself onto the surgeon's blade. When I opened my eyes again, I was back, beaten half to death, just as Silas rushed in. Sarah, is that you? His hand, warm and gentle, brushed against my brow. But a chilling dread shot down my spine. I scrambled backward away from his touch, and he raked my nails across my forehead, desperate to destroy the very feature he recognized. No, you got the wrong person. Blood and tears streamed down my face, my fingernails caked with grime and skin. But he kept my face in his hands, his touch, impossibly careful, and lifted me into his arms. It's okay, Sarah. Don't be scared, he murmured to his men. We're leaving this place. Doesn't matter if you've lost your memory. I'll get you the best doctors. My body went rigid, a violent tremor shaking my entire frame. My mind went blank, a deafening roar filling my ears. The next time I woke up, I was in Blackwood Manor, the room identical to the one from my last life. Sent a jolt of pure terror through me. Ignoring the cast on my leg, I tumbled out of bed and crawled to the window. It wasn't until I saw the endless rolling hills stretching out to the horizon that a choked sob finally broke from my throat.
And I shattered.
Martha, the housekeeper, rushed in. Last time, she had been the one who cared for me so meticulously. Miss, what's wrong? I grabbed her arm, my grip frantic. I'm not Serafina. Please. You have to tell him. You have to. But her expression was calm, placid. She gently helped me back into bed, tucking the blankets around me. Mr. Blackwood said you might be like this, Mississippi. He said, you have amnesia. It's normal to be confused. Her voice was soothing, but it felt like a cage closing around me. You are the one he was looking for. There's no mistake. Just rest, and let us take care of you. But I wasn't confused. I didn't have amnesia. I curled into a ball, whispering the words over and over again like a prayer. I'm not her. I'm really not. In the days that followed, Silas was a constant presence. He'd shed his sharp suits for soft, casual wear, his face fixed in a look of doting affection. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw the same obsessive monster from my past life. He pushed me out into the gardens in a wheelchair. Look, Sarah, I planted these roses for you. They were always your favorite. He placed a single perfect rose in my hand. Do you remember you cried and begged me to give you one just like this? A tremor ran through me. I snatched my hand back and threw the rose, the flower striking him across the cheek and leaving a thin, bloody scratch. Martha gasped and dropped to her knees. Sir, I'll get the doctor right away. No need. Silas waved her off, casually wiping the bead of blood away. It was my fault. I forgot to remove the thorns. I must have pricked her. He bent down, picked up the rose, and patiently began snapping the thorns off one by one. Watching his focused profile, a cold dread settled deep in my bones. In my last life, after he learned the truth, he forced me to kneel in this berry rose garden. Use your blood to dye them red. He had sneered. The color Serafina loved most, the feeling of thorns embedding themselves in my skin, was a phantom pain I could never forget. I shivered, desperate. I tried a new tactic, showing him the scars on my body that were mine alone. Mark, Serafina never had Mr. Blackwood look. I really, not her. But he only traced the faded lines with a pained expression. You've just forgotten. Anyone would be changed after escaping a place like that. His touch was the spark that lit the fuse. A decade of torture flashed before my eyes. A scream ripped from my throat, and I broke, scrambling to flee, only for his man to grab me and inject me with a sedative. Sleep, Sarah, he whispered, his brow furrowed in concern as the world went dark. Sleep, and everything will be okay. I didn't understand this time. I had denied it from the very beginning. Why was he still so convinced? So utterly obsessed? I began to push him, testing his limits, determined to make him see the truth.
He took me to a gala.
I feigned a mad fit and humiliated him in front of everyone. His assistant paled, ready to drag me away. But Silas just tightened his grip on my hand, keeping me anchored to his side. He hired a private chef. I refused to eat. He never forced me, simply leaving the food outside my door. When hunger finally drove me to sneak out in the dead of night, I found the meal was still perfectly warm. He brewed bitter medicine for me, with his own hands practically begging me to take a sip. I smiled, then deliberately knocked the bowl from his hands, scalding his chest and arms. As I braced for the blow I knew was coming, he simply turned and began picking up the porcelain shards. "It's all right, Sarah. It was probably too bitter. I'll go make another batch." A sharp edge cut his finger. The bright red blood stood out stark against the white porcelain. A strange pang of sorrow twisted in my chest. Silas was even gentler than he had been in our first life. But I couldn't let myself be fooled. His gentleness now was a terrifying omen. I couldn't begin to imagine the hell that would await me when the news of the real Serafina's death finally reached him. A month later, I learned Silas was away on business. That night, under the cloak of darkness, I made my escape, heading for the small dense wood on the southern edge of the estate. There was a hidden exit there. In my last life, Silas used to throw me into that forest, to fight for my life against wild animals. As I would lie broken and bleeding, crying for mercy, he would stand over me, his shoe pressing on my shattered limbs. "Do you think Serafina was any less helpless in the triangle?" he'd ask. Spent 6 months in that forest, teetering on the edge of sanity. Before I stumbled upon that hidden gate, I thought I was finally free, but they dragged me back. I can still feel the memory of Silas's fingers, closing around my throat, his voice a low growl. "You will never escape me." Memory made my legs tremble, but I forced myself to keep moving. I didn't stop until my crutch caught on a loose stone, sending me sprawling. The sudden absolute silence was terrifying. My blood ran cold. Instinct took over, and I started clawing my way toward the nearest tree. But it was too late. A tiger's roar ripped through the air, so close I could smell the rot of its last meal on its breath. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the tearing of claws and teeth. But the pain never came. When I opened my eyes, Silas was standing in front of me, his left shoulder clamped firmly in the tiger's jaws. He didn't even glance at the wound. His eyes, intense and searching, were locked on me. "How did you know about this path?" I froze, the world narrowing to his question. Tears, hot and real, welled up and streamed down my face. I collapsed into a heap of sobs. "I was trying to find you," I wailed, letting my body tremble as if from sheer terror. "I don't know how I ended up here." His grip on my arms slowly loosened. "I'm being paranoid," he murmured, his voice dropping low. How could a cripple possibly know the most dangerous and hidden path on the estate? He shielded me with his body, lifting me into his arms and carrying me all the way back to the manor. There was no escape, so I decided to play the part. If he wanted me to be Serafina, then fine. He'd find out the truth eventually, one way or another. I had done everything I could. I started eating again. I stopped fighting him. Whatever he thought his Serafina should do, I did it. But this silence was different from the last. He didn't force me to learn the piano or play chess. Instead, he was always asking me what I wanted. Who was I? Was I his Serafina, or was I myself? I stopped resisting his kindness, but I never once smiled at him. I spent my days on the balcony, my gaze lost on a distant patch of sky. The staff grew accustomed to my silence. Only Martha would sigh, sometimes saying I was like a beautiful doll that had lost its soul. One afternoon, we were playing chess. I stared at my white piece, trapped and surrounded by his black ones, and a single tear rolled down my cheek. "Silas," I looked up, startled by my sudden emotion, and quickly came to my side. "Sarah, what is it? Tell me." "I'm really not Serafina," I said, my voice hollow. "You're going to regret this." He stared at me for a long moment. "You just have amnesia, Sarah. It's okay." I knew he would say that. A bitter smile touched my lips. "I want to go to the Sandbar Cast Triangle. I want to save the people trapped there, the people who were just like I was." Silas didn't blink. The request hung in the air between us, heavy with the scent of old trauma. The Sandbar Cast Triangle, a lawless dead zone of smugglers, human traffickers, and the grime from which he had plucked me twice. "You want to go back," he said softly. It wasn't a question. His fingers stopped toying with the chess piece. "I want to save them," I repeated, my voice trembling but my eyes dry. "If I am your Serafina, if I am the benevolent angel you think I am, then indulge me. Let me save the ones who didn't get a Silas Blackwood to rescue them." I waited for the anger. I waited for him to lock me in the cellar. In the last life, merely mentioning the triangle earned me a week of starvation. Instead, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes remained dead calm, like the surface of a lake hiding a leviathan. Very well, he said, standing up. If that is what will make you happy, Sarah. We leave at dawn. I froze. It was too easy. Just like that. Just like that. He walked over, leaning down to kiss my forehead. I flinched, expecting teeth, but his lips were a ghost's touch. But you stay by my side. If you take one step away from me, I burn the entire triangle to the ground with the people inside it. Do you understand? The monster wasn't gone. He was just on a leash, and he had handed me the chain. The triangle smelled the same. Burning rubber, sea salt, and rotting fish. We arrived not in a stealth boat, but in a convoy of black armored SUVs that cut through the slums like a knife. Silas sat beside me, his hand resting on his knee, dangerously close to mine. I looked out the window at the familiar, wretched streets. This was where I had died the first time, metaphorically, before Silas killed me literally. Which warehouse? Silas asked.
Sector 4.
The container yard. I whispered. That's where they keep the new arrivals. The vehicle stopped. Silas exited first, buttoning his suit jacket. He looked out of place here, a god of death in bespoke Italian wool walking among the rats. His men fanned out, weapons drawn but lowered. I stepped out, my cane clicking on the asphalt. The sound drew eyes. Scavengers and thugs watched from the shadows. Then, a man stepped forward. A face I recognized.
Gregor.
The man who had broken my fingers in my first life because I dropped a crate. Mr. Blackwood. Gregor grinned, revealing yellow teeth. We weren't expecting. You have something that belongs to my wife, Silas said pleasantly. Gregor looked at me. Confusion flickered in his eyes.
He didn't recognize me.
In my last life, I was filth to him. Now, draped in silk and standing beside the devil of Blackwood, I was untouchable. I don't understand, Gregor stammered. The girls, I said, my voice cutting through the humid air. Open the containers. Gregor's grin vanished. Now, hold on. That's merchandise. Mr. Blackwood, surely you understand business. Silas didn't move. He didn't signal his men. He simply walked forward, closing the distance between himself and Gregor. He moved with that fluid, predatory grace I knew so well. He placed a hand on Gregor's shoulder. She asked you to open them. It's against protocol, Gregor sneered, trying to bluster. Silas sighed. In one blur of motion, he drew the silver pistol from his holster and shot Gregor in both kneecaps. The sound was deafening. Gregor collapsed, screaming. Silas didn't look at him. He looked at me, his expression mild, almost bored. Open them yourself, Sarah. I'll handle the trash. I moved toward the containers, my heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me, the sounds of violence erupted, Silas's men engaging Gregor's crew. But I didn't turn around. I focused on the rusted latch of container 402. I threw the bolt. The doors groaned open. Inside, huddled in the darkness, were 20 women. The smell of fear and unwashed bodies hit me, a visceral memory of my own past. They looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. It's okay, I said, my voice breaking. You're leaving. Now. I ushered them out. As they stumbled into the sunlight, weeping and clutching each other, I turned to check on Silas.
Iwish hadn't.
Silas was standing amidst a pile of bodies. He wasn't using his gun anymore.
He was using his hands.
He held a man by the throat, the surgeon who had once stitched me up without anesthesia. Silas looked at the man, then at me. A flash of recognition passed between us. He knows. Silas tightened his grip. There was a wet crunch. He dropped the body like a sack of grain. He walked toward me, stepping over the carnage, his shoes avoiding the pools of blood with practiced ease. He stopped inches from me. There was a splatter of red on his cheek, just like the day he killed me in the last life. Are you satisfied? He asked. They're free, I whispered. Good. He took out a handkerchief and wiped his hands. Then let's go home. I don't like other men looking at you. We returned to the manor, the rescued women sent to a sanctuary Silas funded under a shell company. I should have felt relieved. Instead, the dread was heavier. The timeline was correcting itself. In my last life, this was the week the real Serafina's death certificate arrived. I spent 3 days in the library, waiting for the inevitable. Silas was away at meetings, or so he said. I knew he was likely cleaning up the loose ends in the triangle. On the 4th day, the letter arrived. I saw it on the silver tray in the hallway. The seal of the International Red Cross. My heart stopped. This was it. The moment his fantasy would shatter, and the torture would begin. I grabbed the envelope. I had to hide it, destroy it. If he never saw it, maybe I could keep pretending. Sarah? I spun around. Silas stood at the top of the stairs. He was wearing a black turtleneck, his hair damp from a shower. He looked down at me, his eyes tracking the envelope in my trembling hands. What do you have there? Nothing, I lied. He descended the stairs, slowly, step by step. The rhythm of an executioner. You've never been a good liar, Sarah. He reached me. He didn't snatch the letter. He held out his hand, palm up, waiting. I couldn't breathe. If I gave it to him, I died. If I refused, I died. Trembling, I placed the envelope in his hand. He looked at the seal. He didn't open it. He didn't tear it apart to find the truth about his beloved Serafina. Instead, he walked to the fireplace. He tossed the unopened envelope into the flames. I gasped. What are you doing? I don't like spam mail, he said, watching the paper curl and blacken. That was important. I stammered, my mind racing. It could have been about Serafina. Silas turned to me. The firelight danced in his eyes, making them look like molten gold. I know what was in it, Sarah. The world tilted. You know? Confirmation of death. Date. 3 years ago. Cause. Pneumonia in a refugee camp. He recited the details in a monotone voice. I backed away, hitting the wall. You knew? You knew she was dead. Yes. Then why? My voice rose to a hysterical pitch. Why are you keeping me? Why are you calling me by her name? If you know I'm not her, why aren't you flaying me alive like you did before? The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Silas stepped closer, trapping me against the wall. He placed his hands on either side of my head. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. Like I did before, he whispered. My blood turned to ice. You remember, I breathed. It wasn't a question. Silas closed his eyes. A shudder went through his rigid frame. When he opened them, the mask of the doting husband was gone. Beneath it was the raw, jagged agony of the man who had destroyed me. Every second, he rasped. I remember the cellar. I remember the blades. I remember how you looked at me when you threw yourself on the scalpel. I shoved him, disgust and terror warring in my veins. You monster. You knew it was me this whole time? And you played this sick game? I had to. He grabbed my wrists, pinning them to the wall. His composure cracked. Do you know what happened after you died, Sarah?
Do you?
I don't care. You killed me. I tore the world apart, he roared, the sound echoing through the manor. After you died, I found the certificate. I realized what I had done. I realized that the woman I had been obsessed with, the Serafina I was chasing, was a ghost.
But you were the one who endured me.
You were the one who looked me in the eye. He was shaking now. The invincible Silas Blackwood was shaking. I went mad, he confessed, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I burned the estate. I put a bullet in my own head 2 years later. And then, I woke up. In the fighting pit. Looking at you. He released my wrists and fell to his knees, wrapping his arms around my waist, burying his face in my stomach. It was a posture of submission, of worship. I tried to fix it, he muffled into my dress. I thought if I treated you like a queen, if I gave you the life you deserved, you would never remember. You would just be happy. I wanted to save you from me. I looked down at the man who had been the architect of my nightmares. He was weeping. You can't fix torture with flowers, Silas, I said, my voice cold. I know, he choked out. I know, but I can't let you go. I can't. You are the only thing that is real. The dynamic changed that night. The pretense was over. I didn't run. I knew the tiger trap was there, but I also knew Silas would burn the forest down before letting me trip again. He moved into the guest room. He stopped calling me Serafina. He called me Sarah. He stopped forcing the roses on me. But he didn't let me leave. I began to test the limits of his guilt. I want the cellar destroyed, I told him over breakfast.
Done, he said.
By noon, a construction crew was pouring concrete into the basement entrance. I want access to the accounts, I demanded. Done. He handed me the black card and the ledger keys. I want you to hurt, I said one rainy afternoon, standing by the window. Silas looked up from his book. He stood, walked over to the desk, took a letter opener, and held it out to me handle first.
Do it, he said.
I took the blade. It was heavy. I looked at his chest, covered in the finest silk shirt. I thought about the scars on my own body, the phantom pain of the thorns. I pressed the tip against his chest. He didn't flinch. He leaned into it. A small bloom of red appeared on the white fabric. I could kill him. I could end the loop. But if I killed him, I was just a victim who got lucky. I wanted more than that. I wanted to own him, just as he had owned me. I pulled the blade back. No, I said. That's too easy. You don't get to bleed out and leave me alone with the ghosts. I dropped the letter opener. You live, Silas. You live and you serve me. You use every ounce of that darkness to protect me, to give me the world you stole. He looked at me with a mix of awe and terror. In that moment, he realized I wasn't the fragile bird he had crushed. I was the thing he had forged in the fire. As you wish, he whispered. 2 years passed. The world knew me as Sarah Blackwood, the iron-willed matriarch of the Blackwood Empire. Silas was still the terrifying figure in the shadows, but everyone saw the leash in my hand. We were attending the winter solstice gala. The ballroom was filled with the elite, the corrupt, and the powerful. A man approached us, a rival business tycoon named Mr. Vane. He was arrogant, drunk on his own importance. Mrs. Blackwood, Vane sneered, looking at my cane. I hear you're the one pulling the strings these days. Sad to see Silas reduced to a lapdog. The room went silent. Insulting Silas was a death sentence. Insulting me was worse. Silas stepped forward, his eyes darkening. I held up a hand. He froze instantly. Mr. Vane, I said, my voice smooth as velvet. Silas isn't a lapdog. He's a tiger. And he only bites when I tell him to. I looked at Silas. Darling, Mr. Vane is boring me. Silas didn't smile. He just looked at Vane. Run. Vane paled and scrambled away. Later that night on the balcony, Silas wrapped his coat around my shoulders. The scar on his cheek, the one I gave him with the rose, was silver in the moonlight. Are you happy? He asked. It was the question he asked every week. I looked out at the estate. The roses were gone, replaced by white lilies, my favorite. The cellar was concrete. The fighting pits in Keelhaul Bay had been dismantled, replaced by schools and clinics funded by Blackwood money. I wasn't happy. Happiness was a simple emotion for simple people. We were not simple. We were two broken things fused together by blood and time. I am content, Silas, I said. He rested his chin on the top of my head. I love you, Sarah. In this life, and the last and the next. I didn't say it back. I would never say it back. That was his punishment. He would spend eternity chasing a forgiveness I would never fully grant. I turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the scar on his face. He leaned into my touch, his eyes closing, a monster soothed. Take me inside, I commanded. It's getting cold. He lifted me into his arms, effortless and gentle, and carried me out of the dark and into the light of the manor. We were not a fairy tale. We were a warning. But in the end, the cage was gilded, and I held the key.